My name is Lauren, and what I'm about to tell you happened during the summer of 2022 when I was delivering pizzas for a little place called Dino's in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, before I dive into this story, and trust me, you'll want to hear every detail, if you're new here and you enjoy real bone-chilling experiences like this one, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me share more of these encounters that still keep me awake at night. Pizza delivery wasn't glamorous work, but the tips kept my bills paid. Most nights blended together in a haze of familiar faces and memorized addresses. Same houses, same apartments, same bored customers who barely looked up from their phones. After months on the job, you start to think you've seen it all. You get comfortable. That comfort, that's when something happens that reminds you just how vulnerable you really are out there. It was early August, one of those sticky Florida nights where the air clings to your skin even after midnight. We'd gotten slammed with orders, and my shift had dragged on much longer than usual. By 11:30, sweat was pooling under my uniform shirt, and I was praying each ticket would be my last. I was finally wrapping up when Emma, one of the younger girls, asked if I could drop her off after work. She didn't have a car, and honestly, I didn't mind the company. As we drove through the empty streets, Emma asked if she could tag along for my remaining deliveries. The loneliness of late-night driving had been getting to me lately, so I welcomed her presence. Sure, I told her, not knowing that decision would probably save my life. Around 11:50, my last delivery ticket appeared on the screen. East 19th Street. My stomach immediately tightened. I'd been to that part of town before, the rough side where streetlights flickered like dying candles and every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. The kind of neighborhood where you double-check your locks and keep your engine running. But exhaustion has a way of dulling your survival instincts. I was too tired to argue with the dispatcher, too drained to care about the warning bells going off in my head. We pulled onto East 19th Street just after midnight, and immediately the atmosphere changed. Half the houses sat in complete darkness, while others had boards nailed over their windows like dead eyes. Garbage littered the cracked sidewalks, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked with desperate, hollow urgency. I slowed down, double-checking the GPS coordinates. The destination was a small, single-story house that seemed to crouch behind overgrown hedges like it was hiding from the world. Chipped white paint peeled from its siding like diseased skin, and the porch sagged under the weight of neglect. A single porch light flickered erratically, casting nervous shadows across the front yard. I pulled close to the curb and told Emma to wait in the car. She nodded, already absorbed in her phone, probably grateful she didn't have to make this walk herself. Grabbing the pizza box, I stepped onto the cracked driveway. Each footstep echoed in the silence, and I swear I could feel my body trying to warn me. That cold, crawling sensation that starts in your gut and spreads through your limbs like ice water. But I'd done hundreds of these deliveries. What could possibly go wrong with one more? I knocked twice on the door, the sound hollow and somehow wrong in the thick night air. A full minute passed before I heard movement inside, slow, deliberate footsteps that seemed to drag across the floor. When the door finally opened, my blood turned to ice. The man standing before me looked about 40, with greasy hair hanging in strings around his face and bloodshot eyes that seemed to look right through me. He wore nothing but dirty boxers, his pale skin gleaming with sweat despite the night air. Everything about him screamed danger, but what terrified me most was how he looked at me, not like a customer receiving food, but like a predator sizing up prey. He glanced at the pizza box, then back at my face with an expression I'll never forget. Calculating, hungry, wrong in every possible way. "Hey," he said, his voice rough like sandpaper. "Can you just bring it inside and set it on the table? My hands are full." He held up one empty hand while keeping the other hidden behind the doorframe. That gesture alone sent every alarm in my body screaming. I stepped back instinctively, trying to maintain distance while staying polite. "Sorry, sir. We're not supposed to enter customers' homes. Store policy." This was a lie. Dino's didn't have any such policy. It was just something I told creepy customers to avoid exactly this kind of situation. But the moment those words left my mouth, his entire demeanor shifted like a switch had been flipped. "Are you serious?" His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout. I've had delivery people do it plenty of times. Just come in and set it down. I clutched the pizza box tighter, my knuckles going white. "Sorry, I can't do that." The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like hours. His bloodshot eyes narrowed, and when he spoke again, his voice had become something else entirely. Cold, commanding, terrifying. I said, "Bring it in." I froze. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but my legs felt like they were made of concrete. This wasn't a request anymore. This was a threat, delivered with the confidence of someone who expected to be obeyed. Then he moved. He stepped forward suddenly, his hand shooting out like a striking snake. His fingers wrapped around my wrist with crushing force, and the pizza box tumbled from my hands, cheese and sauce splattering across the rotting porch boards. "Let go!" I screamed, pulling backward with everything I had. But he was stronger, much stronger, and he began dragging me toward that black doorway like I weighed nothing at all. My heart hammered against my ribs as panic flooded every nerve. His grip felt like a steel trap, cutting off circulation, pulling me closer to whatever nightmare waited inside that house. I could smell him now, unwashed skin and something else, something rotten and sick that made my stomach lurch. This was it. This was how I was going to disappear. Another delivery driver who knocked on the wrong door at the wrong time, another missing person poster taped to telephone poles. Then, cutting through my terror like a sword, came the sharp, desperate blast of a car horn. Emma had somehow scrambled into the driver's seat and was laying on the horn with both hands, the sound piercing the night like a scream. My headlights flashed on and off, creating a strobe effect that turned the entire scene into something from a nightmare. The man startled, his grip loosening just enough for me to tear my wrist free. I stumbled backward, nearly falling down the porch steps as adrenaline shot through my system like electricity. Behind me, Emma kept hitting the horn, the sound echoing off the empty houses like a warning bell. I ran. I didn't look back, didn't think, just sprinted toward my car with my heart trying to burst from my chest. My hands shook so violently I could barely grab the door handle, but somehow I managed to throw myself inside. "Go, go, go!" I screamed. Emma scrambled back to the passenger seat as I threw the car into drive, tires squealing against the asphalt. We tore away from that house like the devil himself was chasing us, leaving behind the spilled pizza and whatever sick plans that man had for me. My entire body trembled uncontrollably. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, trying to process what had just happened. Emma kept asking if I was okay, her voice high with panic, but all I could focus on was the burning sensation where his fingers had dug into my wrist. When we got back to Dino's, my manager took one look at my face and immediately called the police. 2 officers arrived within minutes, taking detailed statements while I sat in the break room, still shaking. They drove out to East 19th Street to investigate, but when they returned an hour later, their expressions told the whole story. The man was gone, vanished like he'd never been there at all. But that wasn't the strangest part. The neighbors they spoke to said no one had lived in that house for months. It had been sitting empty, waiting for demolition since April. No electricity, no running water, no reason for anyone to be there. The next day, I walked into Dino's and quit. My manager didn't even try to talk me out of it. He could see in my eyes that something fundamental had changed. Emma stayed on for a few more weeks, but she told me later that deliveries never felt the same. Every knock on a door, every late-night run to a dark neighborhood carried the weight of that night. The police investigation turned up nothing. They found the house completely empty except for a filthy mattress, piles of garbage, and the cheese-stained pizza I'd dropped on the porch. No records of anyone matching his description. No explanation for how he'd known to order delivery to an abandoned house. The property owner confirmed what the neighbors had said. The place had been vacant since spring, just waiting for the city to approve its demolition. So who was that man? Where did he come from, and where did he go? It's been over a year now, and I still can't drive through that part of Jacksonville without my hands starting to shake. I often wonder how close I came to becoming another statistic, another delivery driver who simply vanished into the night. If Emma hadn't been there, if she hadn't thought to hit that horn. The case officially went cold after a few weeks, filed away with dozens of other unsolved incidents. But sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I find myself thinking about that house. About the way he grabbed me with such confidence, like he'd done it before, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I think about other delivery drivers who might have knocked on that door when no one was there to save them. I wonder if that's what he was counting on. Young women working alone, vulnerable and tired at the end of long shifts, with no one to hear them scream. The thought that he's still out there somewhere, waiting for the next opportunity, the next victim. It haunts me. Because I know I wasn't his first target, and I probably wasn't meant to be his last. So to anyone listening who works delivery, or knows someone who does, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't worry about being rude or losing a tip. Don't let politeness override your survival instincts, because sometimes the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes he's standing right at the door, waiting for you to step inside. I had just turned 17 that summer when I started working night shifts for Quick Dash Courier. The job was supposed to be simple, my way of saving money for community college while most of my friends were wasting their summer vacation. Pick up sealed packages from the depot, scan the barcode, follow the GPS, snap a photo when delivered. Most runs took me to well-lit porches or busy apartment lobbies. Once in a while, I'd drop something at a 24-hour warehouse on the industrial side of town. Nothing had ever felt dangerous before. Just dull, late-night driving with cheap gas station coffee and classic rock radio to keep me company through the empty hours. I thought I had the safest job in the world, until that night in mid-October when I learned just how wrong I was. It was a little after 11 when my dispatcher, Cole, radioed in what he called a one-off order, a small brown box, prepaid, same-day rush delivery. His voice carried that half-asleep quality of someone who'd been working too many double shifts. "Last run of the night, Aaron," he said. "Address is 301 Old Quarry Road, way out on the edge of town. GPS says 22 minutes. Old Quarry Road rang a faint bell in my memory, somewhere beyond the river where farmland gave way to dense woods and paved roads turned to gravel. I didn't argue about the distance. More miles usually meant a fatter tip, at least in theory. The depot lights faded behind me as I crossed the Cedar River and followed County H out toward the dark fields. Mid-October air pressed cold against my windshield, and frost already trimmed the drainage ditches like silver lace. Every house I passed sat dark, except for the blue glow of living room televisions flickering behind curtains. 20 minutes in, my cell signal dropped to one shaky bar. That was normal out here in the middle of nowhere, just empty land cut by a 2-lane road and distant radio towers blinking red against the starless sky. When the GPS voice told me to turn left onto Old Quarry Road, what appeared before my headlights was hardly a road at all. It was a cracked strip of asphalt slowly being consumed by weeds, lined by leaning mailboxes that looked like they'd been rusting since the 1970s. I slowed to a crawl and double-checked the screen. Arrive in 0.2 miles. Trees closed over my hood like a tunnel, swallowing the last streetlight behind me. Only my high beams showed each bend ahead, illuminating patches of gravel and broken glass that crunched under my tires like bones. When my headlights finally washed over 301, my stomach dropped. This didn't look like any home I'd ever delivered to. A 2-story farmhouse sat back from the road at the end of a gravel pull-in, its paint peeled away to bare wood that looked black in my headlight beams. Every window I could see had either broken glass or warped plywood nailed across it like dead eyes. The porch rail sagged in the middle, and a January edition of the local newspaper, yellow with mold and age, lay crammed in a mailbox that was still flagged up. No porch lights, no parked cars, No curtains. No sign that anyone had stepped foot inside that house in years. Yet my GPS displayed a bright green pin right at the front door. Destination reached. I killed the engine and listened to the silence. Nothing but the tick of cooling metal and wind whistling through brittle leaves. No dogs barking, no television noise, no indication of human life anywhere. Company policy said I should attempt delivery, but every instinct I had was screaming that this was some kind of prank. I reached for the shift lever, ready to back out of there and call it a failed delivery. That's when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on wood, solid and deliberate, coming from the direction of the front door. I froze with my hand on the keys, staring through my windshield at that dark house. A thin porch post blocked most of my view of the entryway, but I could make out the front door standing half open, swaying slightly as if whoever had knocked was retreating just out of sight. My phone read 11:37 p.m. I pulled up the customer number listed on the delivery order, hands trembling as I dialed. 2 rings, then voicemail kicked in. The message was brief and badly recorded, like someone whispering into an old tape recorder from across a room. Leave the box and walk away. No name, no greeting, nothing else. The line went dead. A cold spike of fear slid down my spine like ice water. If this was some sick joke, whoever planned it knew the exact moment I would call that number. They were watching me right now, somewhere in that darkness. The smart move was to get out of there immediately, drive back to town, log a failed delivery, and argue about it with Cole in the morning. But I kept thinking about that $30 bonus for late-night runs, and how I'd have to explain to my mom why I'd bailed on a simple delivery because I got spooked. Pride won over common sense. I grabbed the package, shoebox-sized, ordinary cardboard, no return label, and stepped out into the damp gravel. The porch groaned under my sneakers as I climbed the steps. Up close, the door looked even worse. Old varnish bubbled like diseased skin. The knob was completely missing, and the hinge screws had pulled half loose from rotting wood. The gap behind it was pitch black, like staring into an open grave. I set the box dead center on a welcome mat with lettering worn almost to nothing, took a quick photo for proof of delivery, and turned to leave. My phone's camera flash lit up the scene for a split second. When the glare faded from my vision, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A narrow rectangle of light had appeared deep inside the house, like a flashlight beam pointed at the floorboards. It drifted left, paused, then vanished completely. Someone was in there, someone was watching me. That was enough. I jogged down the steps, shoes slipping on moss-covered boards, and jumped into my driver's seat. My hand shook as I turned the key. The starter cranked once, twice, then died with a dry click. Battery was dead. Impossible. I'd replaced it just 2 weeks earlier. I tried again. Nothing but a brief flicker from the dome light, then complete electrical failure. In my rearview mirror, I caught movement. The front door was easing wider, the black gap growing until it was nearly 2 feet across. Nobody stepped out, but I watched in horror as my delivery box, the brown package I'd just placed on that mat, began sliding backward across the porch, sliding by itself, scraping against wood with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard, even though no visible hand was touching it. The box disappeared into that black doorway, and then the door swung shut with a bang that echoed through the trees. I yelled, no words, just pure panic, and popped the hood release. I scrambled out with my phone's flashlight, pretending I would check the battery cables even though I knew I wouldn't find anything wrong. Under the hood, everything looked normal. Clamps secure, connections clean. The flashlight beam trembled in my grip like a leaf in a storm. From the house came a long, slow screech, nails dragging across glass. Another shard fell from the broken front window and shattered on the ground below. I slammed the hood and started walking down Old Quarry Road on foot, holding my phone high and praying for even 1 bar of service. Gravel crunched under each step, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence. After what felt like miles but was probably only 50 yards, headlights crested the hill behind me. I waved both arms frantically until the vehicle, a sheriff's deputy cruiser, pulled over. Deputy Matthews, according to his nameplate, had the kind of thick mustache that twitched when he was trying to process something unusual. His expression grew increasingly skeptical as the story tumbled out of me, half coherent with fear and adrenaline. But he took it seriously enough to radio the incident in and offer me a ride back to investigate. When we turned into that gravel driveway, our headlights painted the porch in stark white light. Door closed, window shards glittering on the ground. The package was gone, just like I told him. Matthews left his spotlight trained on the front steps and drew his service weapon. "Wait here," he said, and I didn't argue. He pushed the door open with 2 fingers. It swung inward smoothly, as if the sagging hinges had been repaired while I was gone. His flashlight beam bobbed over empty floors covered in debris, peeling wallpaper that hung in strips like dead skin, and mounds of tea-colored insulation spilling from holes in the ceiling. I caught a whiff of something rotten rolling from that opening. Not just decay, but something else, something that had been dead for a very long time. "Clear downstairs," he muttered into his radio. Checking the second floor. Minutes crawled by like hours. Wind rattled the gutters above us, but nothing else moved in that awful silence. Finally, Matthews emerged from the house, his face pale in the beam of his own flashlight. "No power, no furniture, no one inside," he said. His voice carried a strange tone, like he'd seen something that didn't quite make sense. "The only thing I found was this." He held up a Polaroid photograph sealed in a plastic evidence bag. The picture showed the same porch, but in daylight. The boards looked less warped, but still weathered with age. On the welcome mat sat a different cardboard box. Older, more battered than mine. Under the image, someone had scratched a date in blue pen. 5th April 2018. I would learn later that April 5th, 2018 was the same day the Baker family disappeared from Cedar Rapids without a trace. Mother, father, 2 teenage children, gone from their locked house in the middle of the night, leaving behind dinner plates still warm on the kitchen table. Back at the station, detectives pulled up property records on 301 Old Quarry Road. The house had been condemned 3 years earlier after the last tenant died of natural causes. Utilities had been cut off, and the property was tied up in probate proceedings that seemed to drag on forever. Most interesting was a note in their system. Delivery companies had blacklisted the address after several prank orders in 2020. Drivers would show up to find the house empty, their packages vanishing mysteriously, and no way to contact whoever had placed the orders. Why QuickDash's dispatch system had allowed tonight's job through was anyone's guess. Some kind of computer glitch, they claimed, though IT couldn't explain how an address marked as "Do Not Deliver" had generated a valid ticket. I rode home in a loaner van just as the sun was rising, sleep-deprived and wired on coffee and lingering adrenaline. By noon, curiosity had beaten exhaustion, and I opened my laptop to do some research of my own. A simple internet search revealed something chilling. For months, someone had been posting free stuff ads on Craigslist using 301 Old Quarry Road. The listings would appear for a few hours, then vanish without explanation. No seller contact, no replies to inquiries. Each ad ended with the same cryptic line, "Leave the box and walk away." I closed my laptop and tried to forget everything that had happened. But forgetting proved impossible. Weeks passed. Halloween came and went, cold and eerily quiet. I stopped working night shifts, switched to afternoon deliveries, and started carrying a tire iron under my seat, just in case. The rational part of my mind insisted that what I'd experienced had some logical explanation. Mass hysteria, carbon monoxide poisoning, an elaborate prank gone too far. But on December 6th, when sleet was coating the roads and darkness fell before 5 o'clock, I came home from school to find something waiting on my porch. A package rested against my front door. Plain brown cardboard, about the size of a shoebox, with no shipping label or return address. Just a piece of twine holding it closed and a note tucked underneath. The note was written in the same blue pen I'd seen on that Polaroid photograph. "Thank you for your delivery, Aaron. Here's our photo. Thought you should keep it. 301. Inside the box lay the same Polaroid that Deputy Matthews had shown me, but now a second picture was attached with aging Scotch tape. This new photograph stopped my heart cold. It had been taken from inside 301's front hallway, shot through the half-open door at a teenage courier standing on the porch. The flash had perfectly captured his company jacket, my jacket, and the barcode scanner in his hand. My own terrified eyes stared back at me from less than 2 months earlier, frozen in that moment when I'd taken the proof of delivery photo. Someone had been watching from inside that abandoned house. Someone had photographed me without my knowledge, then kept that image for weeks before mailing it to my home address. I called Deputy Matthews immediately. He and his forensics team bagged the photos, dusted the cardboard for fingerprints, and found nothing useful. They promised extra patrols near my house, but admitted they had no idea who was behind the harassment. The case went cold before Christmas, filed away with dozens of other unsolved incidents. I graduated high school that spring and left for Des Moines, trying to bury the memory under freshman coursework and dorm room noise. 4 years later, I've got a degree and a decent job, but those events still follow me like shadows. Every few weeks, I wake from half-remembered dreams of gravel crunching underfoot. Sometimes I hear that voicemail message whispering in my ear, "Leave the box and walk away," and I wonder what might have happened if I hadn't listened. The rational part of my mind says it was probably just some sick individual playing elaborate pranks on delivery drivers. Maybe someone with mental health issues, or a group of bored teenagers with too much time and too little supervision. But late at night, when sleep won't come and the wind sounds too much like footsteps on old floorboards, I remember that sliding box. The way it moved across the porch with no visible hand guiding it. The photograph taken from inside a house that was supposed to be empty. I think about the Baker family who vanished on the same date as that first Polaroid. I wonder if they received a delivery that night, if they opened their door to find a package waiting on their doorstep. I wonder if they were curious enough to investigate. Most of all, I wonder if whatever haunts 301 Old Quarry Road is still there, still waiting for the next delivery driver to knock on that rotting door, still collecting photographs of terrified faces, still adding to its collection of boxes and people who disappear without explanation. Because somewhere out there, in the dark spaces between towns where cell phone signals die and streetlights end, a phone rings with another order, another address. Another young person looking to make a few extra dollars says yes, thinking the worst part of their night will be staying awake for the drive home. And on a road where half the mailboxes lean like broken teeth, something patient stirs in an abandoned house, waiting for that familiar sound of tires on gravel and footsteps on rotting wood.